Hello. So today the topic that is up is analysis paralysis. Um, would you like to start by discussing what analysis paralysis is, Victor?
Yeah, sure. I'll give my little definition. I'll see if you agree or have a different one.
Uh-huh.
But basically, analysis paralysis in the context of board games is when a player takes an excessive amount of time deciding between different actions on their turn to take to a point where it causes others to become kind of disengaged in the game. And I feel like this excludes if someone's just kind of not paying attention and then it comes to their turn and they take a long time because they weren't paying attention. But an argument could be made for that being a form of analysis paralysis.
Yeah, you mentioned that to me before, and I was a little unsure about at least that second part of the definition. Of course, the first part I think is universal, although I think there are different levels of analysis paralysis as well. Maybe we can start by talking about that a little bit. The term analysis, literally like paralysis. I don't know if maybe there are some people out there who've actually experienced this, where it's your turn, but you're just like frozen because there's just so many options, and you're just like you're not even making progress towards a move. You're just like stuck. That
Okay.
I have seen in practice less, for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised to think that it might exist. The more common case is exactly what you just alluded to. When it becomes a little more like degenerate play, someone is taking super long to take a turn, and then everyone's getting annoyed. Hurry up! Why are you taking so long? And overall, the enjoyment of the game is starting to decrease at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting that you are excluding people who aren't paying attention, or maybe you can clarify this as I explain it a little more.
Yep.
But I think this is almost always at least a part of analysis, a part of the reason why you might take long on your turn, right? I'm sure you're thinking of like the extreme case where it's like, I did my turn, I completely ignore the board game until it's my next turn, or I'm
Yes.
playing on my phone, and then I come back. But I mean, I don't think it's always like 0 to 100, right? You could be kind of a little checked out or distracted. Sometimes that's fine, right? Like, I don't think the ideal image of a board game session involves everyone like lasered in on the board.
I
Like,
mean, it is to me, but
don't get distracted. Like, I'm not a fan of that type of gaming either.
I'm just here for the board game.
So to me,
Yeah.
it's like a spectrum of attention. Of course, I agree. The super degenerate version, where it's like this person's playing, taking selfies between their turns, and there's like no way they would be able to think about their turn because of this.
Mm-hmm.
That I agree isn't, or at least the things we're planning to talk about today,
Yeah.
it's not really related to AP in that way.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I
I was
think
more just thinking that for me, analysis paralysis is like the primary reason they're taking so long is because there's too much to kind of compute or analyze or decide between. Whereas, like, I think obviously, like you said, not everyone's going to be engaged the entire way through a board game, and that's completely fine. But in my mind, it's more just the reason why they're taking so long is because it's too difficult to kind of, or maybe too difficult isn't the right way to put it, but it's just they're deciding between kind of decisions. It's not so much that they weren't paying attention that
that's
factors in.
okay. I agree. It's a lot easier to, if someone's not paying attention, it's easy to pinpoint why they're taking so long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And perhaps that makes for a less interesting conversation. So I'm willing to table it for now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But even that point of view is a little interesting. Let's say someone is paying maybe not 100%, but full, adequate, proper attention to a board game, and still AP is occurring.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very difficult scenario then. Like, how do you avoid AP if that's your point of view here?
Well, I mean, I'm sure we'll kind of touch upon that later on too, but I do think a lot of the times it is. I don't want to say that the game's fault, but there are aspects of the games that will probably make that situation happen more often. Not more often than not, but a little more often, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, so yeah, maybe like we can kind of dive into that and talk about some characteristics or aspects of games that might lead to AP.
Yeah, sure. I agree with you that oftentimes the game is a big reason why.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just like address that right away.
Yeah, I mean to be clear, I think in my mind, I don't think it's necessarily the game's fault.
Okay.
I think it can be avoided despite, or yeah, in spite of the game and whatever complexities it might bring. But we'll kind of dive into that.
Sure. I'm interested to hear it. Okay.
Yeah, like I said, there are, I think, characteristics of games that make it a little more AP prone. One of them is, I guess, a very broad thing in terms of complexity of games. And even that term is a little hard to define. I think there's different ways to approach it. One of them is just complexity of rules. So if like there's multiple different rules that you need to keep track of, like there's edge cases, there's things that chain into each other, things like that, then it's will be hard to kind of naturally decide between two actions or moves or what have you if there are multiple steps to those actions or multiple things to kind of take into account when you're taking those actions. So I think that's something that can definitely trigger AP.
Yep. Yeah, I guess yeah. When it comes to rules, because this is like getting very meta, but there's different types of thinking, right, about game. I think one of them is just understanding, like what the heck is going on, like what is the effect of this move, like what does this mean, like especially if you're playing a game for the first or second or an early number of times, that will happen. But I also think there's the flip side of that, which is you for sure understand the rules completely, but then you're also still stuck because you're trying to find this point of optimality. And that happens very frequently as well. I think even we will likely talk about this a lot, but chess, I think, is a really good example. You know, when I was younger, I used to play a fair amount of untimed chess with, other 12-year-olds. And those games take forever. They really do, because you're staring at the board and you understand all the rules, but you're just trying to compute everything, like what's optimal, and it's like 10 minutes a move sometimes. It's like really, really long. Yeah, and this of course translates to board games as well.
Yeah. Are there any examples you can think of the kind of the opposite, where it's just there's so many rules to take in that you feel like you can't even really understand how to figure out the mechanics of the game, and that is the reason why it's taking so long to figure out a turn?
I would say this certainly happens for games that I've played for the first time.
Yes.
A lot of these, let's say, more complex games that I personally enjoyed playing. First time I played Terra Mystica. First time I played Food Chain Magnate.
Okay.
First time I played Twilight Imperium. I was definitely, confused. A lot of my thinking overhead was just, what the heck is this?
Yes.
What the heck is going on? Type thinking. And of course, this is like an effect you end up taking very long, but even I would hesitate to label that as a true scenario of AP, at least to me.
Okay. Why do you think that is? Because I would definitely label that as, well, okay. Maybe not that. I guess I see what you're saying. If it's like, kind of just like you don't really get what you're doing, then that's a little different than AP.
Yes. I think strictly from the perspective of cause and effect, it fits the definition. But if it's the kind of thing that's just, if I play this game again 2 more times, this wouldn't happen again, it's almost a non-problem, like right away to me.
Okay.
Like all these scenarios I just mentioned where, I'm like, what the heck's going on? By the time I played that game a couple more times, that was gone because I just had a better idea of my strategy and what things could happen after my turn. So to me, this is like not truly AP to me.
Okay, I think that's fair. Do you think one, or I guess, has there ever been a situation where you'd kind of transition from one form of complexity to another, where like initially the first few plays, like you said, you're just kind of struggling through understanding the rules, and then once you did get a better grasp of things that make you feel more AP in terms of trying to actually optimize things?
I think, yes, that's definitely true. I think this becomes more and more true the more like competitive you get with a game, especially when it comes to really critical turns. Like, you know that this is a critical turn because you've played this game enough times. You know, it's like one of the last few moves in like Agricola, for example. You know, like this is really important. And I feel like, me personally, I almost give myself a bit of a pass because it's like, I know this is an important move and I'm not just going to like rush this. And I'm more willing to take my time on a move of that magnitude.
Okay. I think that probably is a little more of like a social thing. I guess part of the social etiquette of board gaming, which we'll talk about, I'm sure.
Sure.
Yeah, kind of going back to the complexity of games, there's also, I don't know if it's really defined as complexity, but just games that shift a lot throughout are games that where the game state will change a lot between turns. So it's kind of hard to pre-plan your turn. Because by the time it gets back to you, and the game state will be completely different, and any plans that you may have made just won't work anymore. I think those kind of like chaotic kind of games can definitely bring about a lot of AP.
I think this is true. So I guess a natural first statement to make before this is like one simple way to mitigate AP that many people say, like this is not something new, is think about your turn before it's your turn, right? Like you can see the board, you can see what other people are doing. You have adequate time to plan your move out. But exactly what you're saying, games where it shifts so much it's hard, right? You can't really pre-compute your turn because there's too many dependencies that you're not going to understand once it becomes your turn. I at least wrote down that I think Power Grid fits this definition. I at least see it a decent amount in practice.
Yes.
When I play Power Grid, I'm talking specifically about the part when you're building your power stations or cities in the different areas of the map. And because this is such like a cost minimization type task, as soon as one like node gets taken, one city gets taken, you kind of have to restart from scratch computing this. And that part of the game always takes fairly long, even with players of a reasonable amount of familiarity.
Yeah, and with Power Grid particularly, and I feel like this might be kind of like a very particular case to this game, but I don't know. I feel like this is kind of, and I love Power Grid, but this is a pretty bad offender to like bring about AP, mostly because what you're computing in Power Grid, I feel like isn't even. It's not really like optimizing. It's kind of more just like, can I actually make this move valid? Like, is this a legal move for me? Sorry, excuse me.
You're good.
A lot of times, you know, if you're looking for like a certain route, and someone takes, you know, a node along that route, that kind of changes the cost quite a bit.
Yep.
Right. And money is also very tight in Power Grid. So if that kind of throws out that option for you, then you have to figure out different options, and those different options each take a long time to compute whether or not those are valid options. So it's not even like you're not even trying to decide because like would this move be better for me strategically. It's more just like, can I actually do this move in the first place? And then the next level is, okay, well, of these moves that I can do, which would be better for me strategically in the long run?
Yeah,
adds more AP, I guess.
I like what you're hinting at here, which is when the thinking is like strategic, what's the best option type thinking, versus, especially in Power Grid, as you just said, literal mathematical overhead.
Yes.
And it's not even an interesting type of thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
That you're being asked to do. I've had some friends who are critical of Power Grid.
Yeah.
Say that the game would be strictly better if everyone just had a calculator. Which is, but sometimes you'll say this to other people who are, more avid Power Grid fans, or even myself, who I'm a Power Grid fan. And it just seems like such a wrong thing. Although it doesn't make the game any more interesting, it just feels wrong. I know, like.
I don't know if I don't think I would mind that, to be honest. Although I don't even know if that would reduce the downtime. So I feel like in my mind, maybe this is me, but if like I need to deviate from my plans, I won't take too long like trying to look up alternate routes, because I feel like in my mind I just like can't compute that in my head. Whereas if I had a calculator, I might be able to like try and look out every different route and optimize my money even more, because it's a little easier, I guess.
I see what you're saying. Oh, even this is starting to branch out into
like
the social aspect, which maybe we'll touch on just in a little bit. Because there are some other mechanics that I think are interesting, or things that I agree cause AP. One of which is the degree of information, and especially perfect information in a game. So I say perfect information because this is kind of really in contrast with hidden cards in people's hands, or in a deck, or dice rolls, where it's not possible for you to know beforehand like the precise optimal move, because you're not going to be able to know these things. Whereas in a game, like chess, like Power Grid, totally open info. I think because that optimum exists, like there's definitely a best move given the info you have, you strive even harder to find it. And I think that does cause a bit of AP.
Yeah, no, definitely. I also feel like in a lot of the perfect information games, there's probably just more information available to you at any given time in general. I feel like this also applies to, and I don't know if this technically qualifies as like perfect information, but in games where like for example, there's a card game, like Hanabi, where technically what's available and what's left in the deck, or you can kind of compute that. It's not technically like perfect information, but the fact that you can know what's available or what's left, I feel like also brings about a lot of AP, because you're like trying to eliminate things and trying to figure out what possibilities are available, and that can also take a decent amount of time.
Yeah, this makes me think of another point, which is the third type of thinking that I just said, which would be like memory based thinking. This is, I think, a bit bigger of a topic, so we might leave it for now. But any game where memory is a big component is also pretty AP prone, in my opinion. You're at this point where it's possible for you to really go through it all and keep track of it all. That's gonna be a bit of an issue for taking longer turns.
I mean, that's also kind of just like Power Grid, where the memory and like the computing is probably a little
exactly. I think so. It's another form of uninteresting thinking. I think the last thing I want to mention is just, and I kind of touched on it a little bit before, is the degree of importance during each move. And I think this plays a part. At least I think sometimes it's a little comforting to know, oh, if I don't do this like critical thing right now, I can do it next turn, or like there are more turns in a game, like that type of thing. Especially if a game has this mechanic that's very much like go around until everyone has passed type of thing. It's a little more easy for you to, pass, like I'll react if I need to. Whereas I'll bring up Agricola again. it's so like you only get so few moves, and the impact of each move is so big
Right.
that you can't help but really think about it. And this comes up again when I talked about it before, but when you know a move is critical, to me that's almost like an AP pass. It's like, okay, you know, we talk about power grid a lot, so let's just keep going. But I feel like the last turn of power grid always takes pretty long, especially if the game is actually kind of close. And to me, I am like totally okay with someone like if it's the last turn of the game and they're like trying to optimize to get to the end condition. Yeah, take as long as you need.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the comfort knowing that this is it. The game's
Yeah,
over after this, so whatever.
Yeah.
But to me, a part of it is also the importance of this move. Like, I know this is critical. Don't rush it. Type of thing.
Okay. Yeah, no, I definitely think that's it's important kind of AP pass, like you said. It makes me wonder though, like and it's hard to differentiate, but it makes me wonder if people just tend to be quicker in like the first few rounds of a game or what have you than they are in like in the later parts, because you assume the later parts are a little more important, I guess.
I think so. To me, I think games should naturally have this flow where I think a good way for a game to be structured is your early turns matter, but they're not like death sentences if you make a mistake, and you can adapt and correct. And at the end, it becomes more and more important. Maybe not strictly increasing. It's probable that the very, very ending, whatever game's already been decided.
In terms of chess, because that does make me think about chess and like the importance of the first few moves versus like the end game moves.
Yeah.
I feel like in chess, all moves are fairly important, and it's not very clear. And something that you did mention or just kind of have down is about feedback loops. And I'm kind of interpreting that as like if you make a move and you know the effect right away, then it makes it a little easier to kind of decide between moves. Whereas it's something like chess where, you know, the first few moves are still very important, but you don't really understand, or you don't really see why those moves are very important right away. It's hard to make those decisions. And I think that can kind of paralyze you in a sense, because you know these moves are still critical, but you don't know why, or you won't get that feedback until it's too late, I guess.
I agree. That's a very good point. There are the obvious feedback loops, like immediate queen blundering.
Yeah.
And then there are like, you can tell it's a tense situation. You can tell it's important here, but there's no obvious depth one moves available to you.
Yeah. I feel like chess might be like the worst offender at that, maybe just because it is such a studied game. So people know, you know, if you make this move, oh, that's suboptimal because XYZ.
I think the mix of perfect info plus very much a 2-player zero-sum game make it one of the really bad AP offenders. I agree.
Yeah, I think the kind of the opposite, where there is a very clear feedback loop, like if you go here, you get 3 points or whatever. That, you know, makes it a little easier to not take as much time. One, because it's very clear, like, okay, this move is better than that move because this gives me 5 points, this gives me 3. But I feel like it's also just, you know, you get positive feedback no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, then again, you don't too much of that in the game isn't interesting, right? It's a delicate balance. So
so I think we touched upon a decent amount of like mechanics and game characteristics that can kind of bring about AP, but there's also the other side, which is the social side of things, and just, you know, the kind of the etiquette and the contract you enter when you start playing board games that definitely play a large role in AP.
Yes. So this is looping back way to the part when I was saying, at least I think personally, the stance I have is that AP is a combination of two things. One being the mechanics of the game, and sometimes games are just AP prone. But the second, and I've seen this from experience, is social dynamics of the game. I think there are some well-known unspoken ones that we've already mentioned, if it's a crucial last move of a game, you can take a little longer. If you know it's an unimportant early move, or maybe it's a well-studied important early move, it should be quick, you know. But I think the group dynamic is a big understated part of AP, at least to me. I would say from experience, I've played in some groups where there's a bit more of an attitude towards playing optimally. Like, people will even explicitly say, that was a bad move. Why would you do that? Like, right after you did something.
Ooh.
Or just kind of make you feel bad and puts all this extra pressure on you to achieve that optimality.
Right.
And I think that can be a little unhealthy. I think highly hyper competitive groups as well, the same thing will occur. If you're playing any of these perfect info, high optimization games and everyone's super competitive trying to win, I don't think you're going to let things go
right
very easily. And that's going to cause AP, whether people want to admit it or not.
So in these kinds of groups, did you find that there was a lot of AP going around, or was there also pressure to A, do well, and B, do it well and quickly?
There is definitely AP that occurs. Well, this is a loose definition of AP. It's turns that take longer to the point that people notice. Not necessarily so long that everyone is really, really complaining. That has happened, a couple times, but I wouldn't say in general that's a common case.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's just all about. I think for me, I'm just a little lower on like the competitiveness when I enter these scenarios. So I'm willing to just, especially if I'm new to the game or I'm not that experienced, I'm willing to just lose. If like it's okay. Like maybe I could not lose if I thought 10 minutes per turn. But to me, that's just not worth it. Like, I don't want to upset the people I play with. I don't want to be taking this long myself. And I at least unconsciously make that trade-off.
Yeah, the kind of the experience of the group is more, you're thinking more about that than your own personal experience, I guess.
Yeah. I don't want to be so hardcore as to say like AP is clearly just how badly do you want to win versus how badly do you want to piss off your playmates scenario. But it comes into effect for sure.
Okay. Have you ever had a situation where you have a kind of an AP prone player and they're also not necessarily doing the best moves?
So I've seen this before, and this is another reason why I think the social aspect of AP should be understood more. Where a player gets pressured so much to hurry up that they just blunder.
Okay.
Okay, now sure, you beat this player, but they like clearly did something stupid.
Yeah.
Or like they didn't think it through and you got a win off of it, but it's not the win you wanted. Right? Chess is almost always played with the clock now. So it's not the best example, but imagine you're playing an untimed game and you're just like so annoyed with your opponent, they like hang a queen. Like, okay, like what are you trying to achieve at this point? Like,
yeah, that's fair. You don't feel like it's a real victory, or you earned it, I guess.
I guess so. This is moralistic levels of board games that it's
yeah.
probably a much bigger topic, but I do have a bit of this perspective when it comes to pushing people about AP is also a lose. Like it's a lose-lose in my opinion because of this.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think it definitely is. And I think the more people push in general for AP, I think it just kind of brings the entire group dynamic down.
Yeah.
It's not, everyone's kind of there and sees that interaction, right? So it's not just you and the person who you're pushing.
Right? This is like, okay, I need to go on like this little side rant, but
okay, yeah, go for it.
I hate it when there's all these Reddit advice threads and someone says, oh, I'm playing with this guy who's so slow. Sure, this is just some text thread, so you don't really know what the situation is.
Yeah.
But I think the overwhelming comments are like, "Don't play with this guy. Find a new play. Just kick him out of your group." Is this the kind of culture we want to be facilitating and promoting in board games? Come on, like this
Yeah, that's
is.
fair.
I'm not about this at all.
Yeah, I think I would probably be more the opposite, where like if someone is pushing someone else because they're taking too long, I would be more apt to like kick that guy out of the group, the guy that's like
Yeah.
pushing people.
I mean,
But I don't know.
this
I
is.
mean, yeah, in general, you probably shouldn't kick anyone out of any groups. They're hard to come by.
I agree. This is, of course, context based, right?
Yeah.
Someone's a new player, they almost for sure get a pass unless it's ridiculous, like they're taking up half an hour or something.
Mm-hmm. But even then, I feel like if you can see that they're obviously struggling with moves, then that might be a good time to kind of jump in and like talk to them about what they're deciding between, or if they have any questions.
Sure, and especially with a new player, I think that's a good point, because I actually do this kind of often, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm teaching a new player how to play some game and their goal is just to come out of this like unscathed, let's say, they just want to learn how to play and have some fun. Often they'll say something like, "Yeah, like what do you think about this?" And I try to be objective, even though I'm often also a player in this game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a very good point as well.
Mm-hmm. It is hard though. Sometimes, like if they're truly kind of paralyzed, then like trying to decide between options, it's hard to know whether or not to step in, or if doing so might just like break their train of thought or what have you.
Yeah,
you also never want to like overstep, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Just, like, hold someone's hand if they don't want that. So it's I mean, ultimately, board games are a social interaction. So it's hard to. There's always things to balance, and it's kind of hard to navigate it sometimes.
So here's an interesting point that someone has brought to me in the past. Let's assume a tournament setting.
Okay.
Which naturally just means that the whole social element of this game is devalued a lot.
Right. Yeah.
Well, let's just start with this. Do you feel like timers are necessary at this point? Because, like, let's say you're playing a board game and $10,000 is on the line.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but if it's me and I don't care about who I'm playing with, like I don't know this guy at all.
Right.
I'm gonna think as long as I need to. Like this is serious.
Well, like first of all, I probably wouldn't enter that tournament. But, yeah, I think in competitive matches, you probably do need some sort of timer or some kind of restraint, just to give everyone more of an equal, I guess.
Yep.
Or make sure the playing field is equal for everyone.
Yeah.
If someone does take like an hour to make a move or what have you, and someone only takes like 20 minutes, then I guess you can say like the person should have taken longer or what have you, but
sure, I think that's a slippery slope at that point.
Yeah, exactly. You can't really do that forever.
I mean, yeah, at that point, it's almost always better to think more, right? Like,
yeah,
unless you're absolutely sure. It's just an interesting thought, because I do think it doesn't exist for me or for you very much, but this idea of board games clearly adds just the construct, forget the social, it's just the game, tournament setting, and how to address AP in that situation.
Yeah, I wonder how they do it, because I know there are obviously a lot of tournaments. I mean, for chess, there's a clock.
Yeah.
I imagine there's probably some clocks or what have you in other tournaments too.
Yeah, I mean, didn't you like play in? We both went to PAX a couple of years back, and
Blunders wasn't wasn't a very serious tournament, I don't think.
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like it's unlikely they would have pulled out the chess clocks, and they would have just hoped that the good graces of all the players involved would have been fine. I mean, it's not a real serious tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think were there prizes?
I don't think there were.
Yeah, if there was 10K on the line, then I think some chess clocks would have come out.
Yeah,
probably.
I agree.
Yeah. But kind of going back to the main point in terms of the social
Yep.
aspects of AP, I think I am kind of more in line with you in that I try and think of the group experience than worrying about winning too much. Um, and plus, it gives me excuse if I lose.
That you
On
didn't, that because
Yeah,
you're rushed.
yeah, man. On Board Game Arena, it tells you at the end of the game like how much time everyone took.
Yep.
And like even if I don't win, I just like scroll to that and see I'm the lowest. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I understand.
That's so weird. Okay.
Uh,
Uh, I think closing thoughts would be, we've talked a lot about causes of AP. Let's talk about solutions, right?
mm,
I think most groups at some point, especially if they're playing games of some level of seriousness, are going to experience AP at some point. And there is some conventional knowledge out there that I think is all very harsh, involves kicking people out, demanding like a higher mental load from everyone involved.
uh,
I don't think these are real solutions.
no,
Um, I don't know. How do you? We've already mentioned some of them, but how do you deal with AP in your experience when you see it?
I think it depends on why the AP is happening to me, or not me specifically, but to the person in general.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
I feel like if it is, they're doing it because they're trying really, really hard to win and they're being super competitive, then I might, give them a push and, just say, or like, I don't know how to nicely prompt them to hurry up, but I would try and figure out some kind of way.
Yeah.
Whereas I know some people that just naturally take longer. I know
Yeah.
they're not doing it because they're like super try hard. I think they're just a little overwhelmed or need to figure some things out. In those cases, I kind of just let it slide and just let them think because I know that's not, their intention isn't to hold up the group or anything like that. And I don't want to ruin their experience either. Because it does feel bad if you enter a board game, especially if it's a long one, and you like you said on a critical turn, you feel like you didn't have enough time, made some obvious mistake, and that kind of ruins the experience. So I don't want that to happen to anyone either. Um, so yeah, I guess no real solution, just let it happen is my approach.
I think that's honestly pretty close to what I do as well. This might make it even worse sometimes, but I don't know. I'm very social like that. So when I see someone's taking a long turn, sometimes I'll just like start a conversation or like kind of take people out of it. Like, let's not all just sit here in silence while we like glare at this person who's thinking. I'll make some small talk, which
Yeah.
might be frowned upon.
No, I think that's fair. Like I always hesitate to do that because I feel like it could be distracting.
Yeah,
But I think that probably is the best thing to do is to kind of minimize the tension that might exist because
oh
of
yeah,
it.
that's when I'm pulling out the snacks, like asking people if they want another drink. Like
Yeah, there you go. Just get them drunk. They won't care. They won't know how much time has passed.
exactly.
It's okay.
Yeah,
But I think the other situation is harder where someone is like trying really hard because they're being super competitive. I don't think I've faced that too much in my experience, so I don't really honestly know
yeah.
how to deal with that.
I'll admit I don't either. Like the hardcore, purely competitive reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think we both agree on this that there's a bit of this unspoken, unwritten rules, if you may,
Mm-hmm.
when people play a board game together. And one of those unwritten rules is to have a reasonable time versus
Yeah.
success trade-off. Yes. Do you have
What do you think,
anything
Winona?
else? um,
Yeah, no, I
I
think
don't know if I have any other final
no,
thoughts,
you're
but
good. Yeah, I think you're right. Like we've kind of touched upon, when you enter a board game, it is kind of a social contract. Might be a little too formal to put it that way, but there's an understanding, like you said, that we're here, as a social experience and here to have fun ultimately. So trying to do whatever it takes to maximize that, I think, is always appreciated by everyone in the group,
yes, very much
even
so.
if
And
it involves tanking your own game.
yeah, I mean, just I think AP is misunderstood in general. When I see at least people on Reddit and other online forums who take it from a very mechanical, very transactional point of view, and I totally agree with you that there's more to it than just that.
Yeah. Plus, those people are probably taking longer than they think.
And I mean, this is like layers of awareness.
Board games are hard, people.
They are. They are.
Zoom through it. Jeez.